In a disturbing trend that has been making headlines across the country, a high school teacher in Oklahoma has been arrested under shocking allegations of raping a student. This case is just the latest in a series of such incidents that have raised questions about the safety of students in educational settings. With a small-town backdrop and a troubling series of events, we are about to dive deep into the details of this particular case, exploring the charges, investigation, potential defenses, and the wider implications of these incidents becoming all too common. The arrest and investigation. What we know so far. Britney Gray, a 30-year-old mother of two, is facing serious charges after being accused of sexually assaulting a student. According to officials from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the case began when the local police received a report of misconduct involving a teacher and a student at Blair High School, a small school located southwest of Oklahoma City. The town of Blair, with a population of around 700 people, is not used to such scandalous news, which likely made this case the talk of the town. Upon receiving the report, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agents quickly got to work, securing a search warrant for Gray's home. The search revealed that Gray had engaged in inappropriate communication and physical contact with the student on several occasions. In addition to these accusations, investigators discovered that Gray had been in contact with the student through electronic devices. After analyzing her devices, the agents found evidence suggesting that Gray had traveled between Blair and nearby Martha, another small town where the victim reportedly lived. The situation took a darker turn when investigators found that Gray had attempted to cover up her actions by deleting messages between herself and the student. There were reports indicating that Gray had even searched online for ways to erase data, which raises further concerns about the depth of her alleged misconduct. The student allegedly admitted to the relationship in question, and court records show that a criminal warrant was issued for Gray's arrest on January 23rd. The next day, she was arrested, and after posting a $25,000 bond, she was released while facing charges of second-degree rape and evidence tampering. The legal charges and what they mean. The charges against Gray are significant, and if proven true, carry serious legal consequences. According to Oklahoma law, second-degree rape charges typically require the prosecution to prove 3 key points. Sexual intercourse occurred, the victim was not the spouse of the defendant, and there was some aggravating factor, such as the defendant's position of authority or the victim being under the age of 16. In this case, the victim is reportedly a student, which places Gray in a position of authority, making the situation far more complicated legally. Additionally, Oklahoma law stipulates that even if the victim is over the age of consent, which is 16, any sexual relationship between a teacher and a student can lead to serious criminal charges due to the inherent power imbalance in such a situation. This distinction is crucial in understanding the charges against Gray. Though the victim's age is still unclear, the fact that Gray was an employee of a school, an authority figure over the student, may be enough to sustain the charges. Gray's attempts to cover up the situation by deleting evidence only served to strengthen the prosecution's case. The fact that she tried to erase data from her electronic devices speaks volumes about her awareness of the wrongfulness of her actions. These attempts to destroy evidence could lead to additional charges, further complicating her defense. It's important to note that while this case is still developing, the evidence against Gray seems to be substantial, leaving little room for her to deny the core accusations. Why do these cases keep happening? Unfortunately, cases like this are not rare. Teachers and other authority figures abusing their power over students is a recurring problem that has been exacerbated by social media and electronic communication. In many of these cases, students and teachers communicate through social media, messaging apps, and text messages, which can easily slip under the radar of school authorities and parents. This digital communication can sometimes be the key to proving such crimes, but it also makes it harder to detect them in the first place. In this case, the fact that the teacher was able to communicate directly with the student through electronic means without any oversight shows just how much vulnerability exists in the current system. Parents are often unaware of the private communications their children have, and schools sometimes fail to intervene in what should be red flags, particularly when relationships begin to develop between students and teachers. The fact that Gray was also a counselor at the school adds another layer of concern. Counselors, who should be figures of trust, had direct access to students and often maintained confidential relationships with them. This access and the perceived safety in these environments create an opportunity for inappropriate relationships to develop unnoticed by the wider community. Experts agree that these types of relationships tend to evolve over time, starting as innocuous conversations, but eventually turning sexual. The student may initially feel flattered by the attention, but as the relationship develops, it can quickly become manipulative and abusive. Sadly, many times, these relationships are not immediately detected by parents, school officials, or even the students themselves, who may not initially recognize the danger. Jury selection and venue considerations. Given the small size of the town of Blair, the question of jury selection and trial venue is an important consideration. In small towns, it can be challenging to find jurors who are not familiar with the case, the accused, or the victim. This could pose a problem for Gray's defense, as it may be difficult to assemble an impartial jury. The defense may request that the trial be moved to a different venue, and the judge will have to weigh the benefits of such a request carefully. The fact that this case is drawing so much local attention could make it challenging for Gray to receive a fair trial in Blair. If the case does go to trial, the court will have to determine whether it is possible to find jurors who have not already formed an opinion based on the media coverage or local gossip. If the case is moved to a different jurisdiction, it could affect the overall tone of the trial and the legal proceedings. Potential defenses and legal challenges. Despite the substantial evidence against Gray, her defense team will likely explore a few potential arguments to try to mitigate her liability. One possible defense is that there was no sexual contact between her and the student, which would certainly call into question the rape charges. However, given the evidence that investigators have gathered, this defense may be difficult to pursue. Another potential defense could be that the evidence against her was obtained unlawfully. If the defense can argue that the search of her home and the seizure of electronic devices violated her rights, it could result in the evidence being inadmissible in court. However, this defense will depend on the specifics of the search and whether proper legal procedures were followed. Finally, Gray may argue that she was not the victim's direct teacher and that the student was of legal age at the time of the alleged incidents. While this might reduce the severity of the charges, it would not necessarily absolve her of guilt, as teachers, coaches, and other authority figures are still prohibited from engaging in sexual relationships with students under the law. The personal life of Britney Gray, a factor in the case. As is often the case in criminal trials, the personal life of the defendant may come under scrutiny. Gray's divorce from her husband in 2023 and the shared custody of their 2 children may play a role in her defense strategy. In some cases, defense attorneys attempt to use a defendant's personal circumstances, such as a difficult divorce or other life stressors, to explain their behavior. However, as legal experts point out, personal problems, while perhaps contributing to a defendant's state of mind, do not justify criminal actions. Having personal struggles does not absolve a person of the harm they inflict on others, particularly when it involves the abuse of a vulnerable individual like a student. Therefore, while her personal life may be explored during the trial, it is unlikely to have a significant impact on the outcome. The search for other victims. As with any case of sexual abuse involving an authority figure, there is always the possibility that there are additional victims. Investigators will likely be pursuing any leads that could reveal whether Gray had inappropriate relationships with other students. In cases like these, school officials may send out notices to other students and parents, urging them to come forward if they have been affected. If other victims do exist, it could significantly affect the severity of the charges and the potential sentence Gray faces. At this point, however, there have been no public reports suggesting that other victims have come forward. While it is still too early to determine the full scope of the investigation, the authorities will continue to examine Gray's history and interactions with students to ensure that no other individuals were harmed. And that wraps up our deep dive into this shocking case. What do you think? Do you believe justice will be served, or is there more to this story than meets the eye? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel.